Thanks everybody for coming today, much appreciated. Welcome to the Mind Your Own Data panel. This is our third panel that we're hosting. We feel like we've gotten the hang of things at this point. We've had some really good panels in the past. One of our former panelists is here in the audience as well, which is great. So I want to thank everybody. My name is Anshay. I'm the CEO of Verbal+Visual. We create digital experiences for challenger brands and change agents in the retail space. So a lot of e-commerce, as well as a variety of different digital experiences and digital platforms. In the past, we've worked with clients like Citizen Watches, Wacoal Lingerie, Supima Cotton, and many more. And then for anybody here or anybody who's watching online, we have 1 hour of complimentary audit time for anybody who's here on your website. So we'd be happy to chat about that at the end of today. The other thing I wanted to bring up was our hashtag for today is Mind Your Own Data, hashtag Mind Your Own Data. So if you're on Instagram or Twitter, please hashtag us so we can get the word out about these events. We definitely want to grow these events into bigger and better events as we continue to grow. And then the last thing I want to do before we start is thank TechSpace, which is the office space you're in here. So if you're ever looking for office space, give me a shout and we'll get you connected with the TechSpace folks. So why don't we hop right into our panel. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. Special thanks to our panelists as well. I'd like to start with a question for each of our panelists. They'll introduce themselves and answer the question. So the first question is, what is the most important data point to be aware of when targeting consumers or customers on your digital platforms? We can start with you, Terry.
Hi, so my name is Terry Rice. And I am a digital marketing trainer and consultant at Brooklyn Digital Marketing, which is my company, and it's conveniently located in Brooklyn. In addition to that, I also teach digital marketing classes at General Assembly here in New York. So to answer your question, for me, the most important data point is CPA, meaning cost per acquisition. Therefore, from that I can know, all right, well, this audience is coming in at a price point that's aligned with my goals. Now, could I find more people like this? Or this one didn't work out so well, I should probably stop doing that. Not a good idea. And so long as you're tracking that, you can course correct and continually optimize your campaigns. So for me, that's the most important one.
I'm Joseph Sauro. I am the analytics team lead at Direct Agents, a direct response digital marketing agency. And I would have to say that the most important metric to look at for this was kind of correlates with Terry's over here, with conversion rate. You really want to make sure that you're targeting a user group that is most likely to convert, which ties into CPA there. So making sure that it's a highly relevant group will definitely go a long way in driving your digital marketing campaigns.
Hi, my name is Rachel George. I do startup consulting in the work with a bunch of different startups in the marketing spaces focused on mobile analytics, as well as brand and product management. I would say from the mobile perspective, it's kind of an interesting one because there is definitely a focus on cost per acquisition and conversion rates, but it's really sort of a twofold picture. One, with getting them to download your application and engage with you in the first place, and then measuring how they engage with your application through to the point of a full conversion within the app.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. So I'd like to start with Google Analytics, because that's a very common topic, of course. So Terry, what are some of the more advanced methods and aspects of Google Analytics that most people working in GA miss?
Yeah, good question. With that, I think a lot of people use Google Analytics just out the box. And essentially, there's three things you can track with that. One is conversion, meaning someone hit a URL. Another is time on site, and another one is pages viewed. I think if you go a step further and actually start tagging events, such as a button being clicked or a video being played, you can find how that correlates with someone making a purchase. For example, if someone watches this preview video on my landing page, are they more or less likely to convert versus people who have not? And you can easily make a segment of these people, should you choose to do so, look at the different conversion rate, cost per acquisition, things of that nature, and see if this interaction actually benefits your site or maybe it takes away from it. And then from there, you know how to further optimize your website experience using GA.
Great. Just, do you have anything to add to that? I know you work PGA all day long, so.
Yeah, definitely. So I find a common one is really lies in utilizing the admin sections. And that is done in a variety of ways that can really help you bring together your data points so they are easily analyzed. Many of those lie into making sure that your traffic is being grouped into the correct channel grouping. So when you're making analysis, you really do know how each of your marketing channels are performing and they don't have miscategorized information. Another one is really cleaning up your page URLs so that you don't have extraneous parameters that really don't have any impactful insight to you as an analyst, but maybe they're more there just as a back-end tracker that doesn't play into that. So really cleaning that up so it doesn't split your data up into one page into 10 different rows of data, then you have to combine it yourself. You could place specific rules on there and filters that will bring that data together into one single row, so it'll be more easily analyzed.
One thing I've seen a lot in Google Analytics, we've worked on a lot of different sites, and I don't know if any of you have seen it, is spam. And that can really infiltrate the data and mess up what you're looking at from an analytics perspective. Have any of you experienced that as well in the past?
Yeah, I have. Well, is anybody not? No. Spam free. No, so yeah, I absolutely have. And if you can identify a common source of that spam, you can actually set up a filter to block that out. Within your your views, when you're setting it up, you can hit a button that says block out bots, like known spam. So that's going to help with that because it does throw off your data. And I think with those filters, one thing people don't think about is to actually filter out their own internal data, meaning the data that you're generating to your site all day while you're on it. And I was working with one of my clients, and I said to them, doing the math, it looks about 20%. Looks like about 20% of the data that you're looking at and analyzing is actually internally generated. She was saying, "Well, you're spending a lot of time on site." I'm like, "That is you. You went too much." So what you want to do is filter out the internal data by looking at your IP address or the IP address for your company and blocking that out because you're just looking at a lot of false positives, which can totally skew your data.
Going off Terry, with that, it is good practice to set up multiple views. So you'd have your master view, which is all your data points coming in. You'd have your external view, which is everything but your internal traffic, and then you can have an internal traffic view as well to ensure that your data is split up that way and you are not analyzing those false positives there. As well as with the spam traffic, it is always good to see and isolate where exactly is that spam traffic coming from. Is it coming from a specific browser, a specific operating system, or a combination of the two? And that can really help you dive in and isolate that, so then you can go ahead and exclude that IP.
Right. Joe, have you seen data used to predict customer behaviors and increase conversions?
Yeah, definitely. It really comes down to the example I would use. It comes down to user experience and what users are interacting most with on the site. I've had a client where they had a really small search bar on their site, and when looking at the Google Analytics data, you can see how people are interacting with search, people who utilize on-site search, and people who do not. You see that those who did have a much higher AOV and a higher conversion rate than those who do not. So with that, recommendations go into place on how to redesign the header of this e-commerce site, suggesting that you should have a much larger search bar that goes pretty much 75% of the way across the top of the screen. And then when the user scrolls down, you have a consolidated version of that header, so that search bar is always visible to the user, whether or not they're at the top of the page or the bottom of the page. And with that, we saw much more engagement with the search bar, as well as revenue being driven through that, which increased the bottom line.
Before we get to Rachel and Terry, can you explain what AOV is? Because maybe some folks don't know.
Sorry. AOV is average order value.
Great, sounds good. Rachel, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would say actually you can do the exact same concept but apply to the mobile space. So any points within your mobile application that you want to test, you can set up easy A/B testing to figure out which ones have the most positive impact on the overall flow, the average order value, the conversion rate, all those types of things. But essentially constantly testing your assumptions and developing different types of theories and putting those to the test can really help you maximize the overall user experience.
Great. Terry, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. With that, I think it's great, to have predictive analytics and all this great data. But I think you don't want to remove the human element from the equation. And by that I mean, for example, let's say I'm an e-commerce retailer and I have a recommendation engine on my site that says people who bought jeans were more likely to buy this product. Well, it's probably going to be another pair of jeans, right? So with that, am I clouding the decision-making process with the consumer to the point where, well, I had this pair of jeans in my cart and I was about to check out, and then you show me these other ones, so now I'm kind of thinking about this. Now I'm going back and forth, and now the doorbell rang and I abandoned my cart. Does it make more sense to say people who bought these jeans, something else, maybe a shirt, a belt, something that's a complement as opposed to a substitute? Because you're essentially competing with yourself now on your own site. You want to take a look at that and say, is this a good idea or a bad idea? And don't let the machines take over, essentially.
Yeah, we don't want a Terminator situation.
Exactly.
Sounds good. One thing that we hear a lot about is the term big data. And Terry, I know this is one of your areas of expertise. Can you explain the difference between big data and little data, and what that all entails?
Yeah, so I mean, there's no necessarily litmus test for big data versus little data. Sorry, you failed data. But essentially, very large streams of data that you might have to have in a server to actually manipulate. That would be my operational definition of it. But I think some people feel like because they don't have large amounts of data, they can't analyze something. That doesn't mean we'll quit and give up. Start from somewhere, right? The data you have coming in, you can still see what's the optimal experience. You're going to look at exposure events, conversion events, and you're going to want to reach statistical significance, 95% confidence, in saying this version works better than this version. So yeah, maybe you're not using some cool programming language, but you still do have math, which has been around for a lot longer time than big data. So use that to your advantage to inform your decision-making process.
Great. Rachel, can we chat a bit about what methods you use on mobile to segment data and target users on a more granular level?
Yeah, sure. So I think we'll get to this also, but what's so interesting about the mobile space is that you can actually pull all the data points and pin it down to one individual consumer. So if you use a tool that gives you insights into the general app analytics, such as visits and the higher level insights, but you also use a tool that gives you more granular, sort of a CRM system almost, where you can have the demographic and the psychographic information pinned down to each individual user. You can then start to do really interesting segmentation. So giving you, instead of like a very robust segmentation engine with lots of filter options and rules around it, will allow you to narrow it down to, let's say, women who are between 25 and 35 in New York City that go within a certain geographical area and also have visited your app within the last 3 days and made a purchase within the last 2 weeks. So if you are able to narrow it down to really interesting, compelling segments like that, then you can do a lot of really exciting stuff around push notifications and app alerts, offerings, and other things to promote whatever your end business goal is for the application.
Great. And piggybacking off of that, what are the tools that you use? And I'd love to hear from Joseph and Terry as well. What are the tools that you use in your day-to-day use within the data and analytics space?
It's a great question. There's actually a ton of tools in the space now, so it's a bit crowded. I'd say if you're looking at picking a mobile analytics tool, the most important thing is to figure out who's going to be using it within your organization and then what you want to get out of it. So there's certainly a lot of the first to market in this space tools are really focused more for the data science crowd, but now there's a lot of tools that are available such as Localytics that give you a hybrid of robust data options but also are more user-friendly and give you those marketing actions that you can take immediately. So it really depends on what you're trying to get out of it.
Can you name some of the platforms, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. I think that I would say Localytics and AppBoy are great if you want to be able to see a lot of data and then also take action from a marketer's point of view. If you're specifically focused in pushing out lots of messaging, Urban Airship is great for that. If you want to dive deep on data, Mixpanel is obviously a great one. If you want to pull in third-party data, Flurry is a good one to use. You can append a lot of different data sources, and also Google Analytics and Omniture if you're already working within those platforms.
Great.
Lots of options.
Or you, Joseph?
Yeah, a little bit of overlap here, but Google Analytics is definitely one that lots of you probably are already using. Also Adobe, Omniture, Site Catalyst, whichever one you'd like to call it at this point. They tend to change it quite often. And pairing with that, Adobe Audience Manager definitely helps especially when you're going into that programmatic space and really isolating those highly engaged and profitable segments, as well as understanding which segments aren't as engaged for you and finding out a way to reactivate them and to turn them into converters and be those high profile audiences for you.
Yeah, I'd agree with your recommendations. And speaking from the Omniture Adobe standpoint, I used to work there, so I have to say, yeah, it's a great platform. It's also somewhat cost prohibitive as well, though. So the reason why I like Google Analytics a lot is because everyone has access to it, which is great because if everyone has access to it, there's a lot of user-generated content around how to do it, right? So you have this larger community of people who are going to be filling out help documents and on Reddit and Tumblr and forums like this, helping you if you have a challenge as opposed to waiting for this company to get back to you. So I think there's definitely a benefit in having a large audience to pull information from.
Great. Joe, how have you used data in advanced ways to optimize digital ad spends? Obviously, there's building the website and optimizing the website, but then there's marketing for the website. So I'd like to move on to that topic a little bit more.
Yeah, a great way to look at that is really to understand what is the correlation between your marketing channels and your efforts. Is there a positive or a negative correlation, and is it significant too? Because we want to make sure that the decisions that we are making, especially when it comes to ad spend, that they are actually statistically significant decisions. So a way to look at that, and a great example there is saying, is there any correlation for when an email goes out to your consumers? Are you seeing an influx in paid search traffic? If so, you need to really make sure you have a cohesive message across your initiatives there so that your email message, that moment users are getting that message and that it's just driving home for them, which is really going to increase their conversion rate in the long run.
Great. I think we've heard statistical significance a few times here, so I'd love to go over that a little bit. For each one of you, I'm sure there's a different kind of meaning for that. I'd love to hear what your feedback is on achieving statistical significance and when data becomes valid, so to speak.
Yeah. For statistical significance, it's important that when you're measuring it, that one, you have a large enough sample size. And that is a key part there. There's many times where you see your data and you think it's significant after 1 week, but then 2, 3, 4 weeks go by and you see it flip on you. Also, it's important when you're doing these tests and running these optimizations that you really have control over your test environment. You're measuring one variable at a time or different interactions amongst variables so that you can really isolate what was the impacting cause of this change that I'm seeing, and then how can I leverage that to increase profitability.
Yeah, I'd agree, and with that, it's important to test elements at the same time whenever possible to get rid of any kind of noise in the data. So not 1 week and then, let's try it again next week. Well, you had a Super Bowl commercial next week, that's why your numbers are looking so different. And when it comes down to the actual math of it, reaching that 95% confidence that we talked about so much, I typically just use an online calculator where I put in exposure events, conversion events for 2 different experiments, and then see which one won. So I sound mathy because I'm like, oh, we're only 85% confidence, but I'm really just pushing in entering some numbers. But why it's important to know that is because people are going to come to you, client or stakeholder, and to say, when are we going to know? When are we going to know? Next week? Next Friday? I don't know. I need data, not time. I can predict how long it's going to take to get that data, but I can't tell you by next Friday for sure because I'm not sure we're going to have enough exposure events and conversion events to make that call. So you almost need to get comfortable pushing back with math instead of kind of buckling to that pressure and saying next Wednesday I'll let you know.
Fair enough. Rachel, how about you?
I think I would just echo what these guys said about it. I think that this is sort of a sidebar, but one interesting thing that I found working with social media analytics that I think is always interesting to keep in mind is that I found that in that space a couple years ago, generally most tools were flawed in some way. And so there comes a point when I'm looking at data where if there's some sort of underlying issues that might be concerning for me, I don't feel like I necessarily always have to take something at statistical significance. I can take it at directional, and that might have an impact on how I make the decision. So I might not personally go into it with a full amount of confidence, but I do say, well, directionally the data is leaning towards this way. So it gives us additional insight when you don't have the option for statistical significance.
Right. So it really is a mixture of time and actually having the amount of people using the service, right? So it is both. Would you say it'd be one over the other? It's definitely a number of people, I'm assuming. the number of active users to achieve that.
Yeah.
Cool, sounds good. So for everybody, where do you see the future of data and analytics going?
Gosh, I think it's really exciting to think about the possibilities of where we're going across the board. I think data in general enables so many amazing opportunities in the future that are going to impact every element of our lives. As a marketer and consumer, I love that data is becoming more and more centric to the way that companies make decisions. For me personally, I leverage mobile far more than any other channel, so I love being able to be targeted with personalized push notifications and relevant in-app alerts, and constantly be able to passively consume all the information that I want from every company that I'm in contact with. So I hope and I look forward to the ability for data to make my life more efficient and overall improve it in several ways.
Yeah. I'd agree, especially on the mobile standpoint, because for anyone who does like retail and e-commerce, like the holy grail is like online and offline, right? How do you actually prove that join? And with Google and now Facebook making big strides to actually map that and saying, okay, someone saw that on mobile, on desktop, at home, but we're now tracking people who are doing store visits, and beyond that, we're saying, okay, well they were also near the register for a long time, they probably bought something, right? So making that join between online and offline is this holy grail that we're all searching for. It is somewhat being solved more efficiently now.
And to piggyback off that, with the future of data and analytics is, I'm excited because we're continuing to improve. We're filling those dark spots where previously we weren't able to track it, such as the online, offline, as you had mentioned. And we're going into new spaces as technology progresses, such as going into connected TVs, which weren't even a thing years ago. And now that's a new area that we're able to track and see how users are engaging with apps across the board, desktop, mobile, and it's an exciting time.
That's great. And with all these, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So with all these exciting advancements, is there any major concern, and we see this with consumers all the time, about data security, both on the consumer side as well as with the folks that are in charge of that data?
I'd say yeah. I mean, there has to be some kind of concern.
There's concern, but
we're good.
We're good. What are the things that are most concerning for consumers that you're seeing out there? What are the things that brands really have to be cognizant of, especially in terms of protecting their data?
I think on the high level of this stuff is that I think brands are just starting to understand that they need to establish that security relationship with consumers. So basic stuff is putting in things like privacy notices, making like with mobile applications when they download their app, making the policies that you agree to a little bit more clear, so you understand as a consumer I'm agreeing to this, and that brands treat it with the reverence that your personal data should be treated. I think that I've seen this in a couple different spaces, especially within the healthcare space. There's so much aversion to digitalization of a person's components, in a sense, and it's really scary for a lot of consumers to think about companies having multi-data points on them, and then how it is going to be used, but also is that company, are you trusting a company that actually cares and is taking really strong measurements to make sure that everything's secure and locked down. So I think that I think on the company side across the country, we have a lot of work to be done to figure out what that looks like and how to make it secure, and then how to communicate that to consumers if we're going to continue building those brand relationships.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think part of this is having empathy for the whole customer online journey. And with that, I'll give an example. One of my clients, e-commerce retailer, they were having challenges with their conversion rates, and we actually mapped that path to conversion via Google Analytics, and we noticed people would put something in their cart, and then go to checkout, and then from checkout, they would go to the About Us section, and a lot of them ended up leaving. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Why is someone going from checkout to About Us? Trust. They didn't trust the company, so like, well, let me get a little background on you guys first. And maybe they could have optimized their About Us section a little bit better so people didn't leave, obviously. But what we did was we improved the whole checkout flow by saying, yes, we are Better Business rated. We've been in this magazine, and yes, this is a secure transaction, all those things. So having empathy for what the person's going through, and this is explicit data, this is not implicit data, or sorry, no, this is why I'm leaving. But you kind of have to keep that human element involved again, just think about what someone's going through, to make them do that.
Yeah, I agree, especially with one, bringing it forward to the consumers to put them at ease when they're making a purchase, but also being able to back that up on your end to ensure that none of their personally identifiable information will be leaked. So definitely those security precautions need to be made on both ends, the back end and the front end for the customer.
Great, and Google's putting into play, secure certificates being pretty much mandatory at this point, which also helps. So making sure that that security is really being upped by all of these platforms along the way is quite beneficial, I'm sure, as well. Are there any other final points or final takeaways from today's chat that you all would like people in the audience to go home with? Not really? No?
I would say we've talked a lot about different types of data and how you use it, but I think the most important part of this is before you even go in and you start analyzing your data, you need to make sure that it's correct. Because we're talking about all these different ways to slice and dice it and what you can do with it, but if your data collection is flawed and there's an error in it, the decisions and insights that you are drawing from it could prove to actually have an adverse effect on what you're looking for. So it's always important to really vet it out and make sure everything is tracking as it should be.
Great.
Okay. I was gonna say that at least in the mobile space, there's so many things that you can track if you have an owned mobile app, and that process can be, it's a great process to go through, but if you go through initially and you track every single possible data point within an application, it can be really overwhelming initially. So I think that for starting out and then in general, what's really important to keep in mind if you want to really leverage your data is to understand what are your initial business goals, what are your what are your KPIs, and what is it that you need to prove in this application to really show success. And then from there, build that down into what do those data points look like, how do I want to bring those together, and then implement your data plan. That can make a huge difference in your efficiency going forward.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think overall, I think we need to remember that data is a proxy for people. So when you look at your bounce rate, that's a human going to your site and leaving. Something's wrong, fix it, right? If you notice, in your conversion funnel, people go to the shipping page and then they leave. Well, maybe you charge too much for shipping, or maybe you retarget them with an ad that says free shipping, right? So use that data to better understand the person that you're going after, and just don't think about metrics, right? Think about people. I think again, keeping that human element to the whole decision-making process will help a lot.
That's a great point. Well, thank you, everybody. Next up, we have a Q&A for anybody that has any questions. Anybody? Yes.
We talked a little bit about offline versus online sales. I think that it's a very interesting question. It always depends on kind of what the business objectives are, but how do you think about your KPIs and your goals and what you're driving to when you have offline? Like, for example, I've heard someone say something along the lines of people always assume that an abandoned cart is a really poor metric, right? So that's something that you want to fix. But for a case where you have omni-channel shopping, that actually means that they may have gone to the store and purchased it. So in those situations, like how do you, especially for online and offline, how do you use data to kind of get at the nuance of human behavior? That's for anyone.
Thanks.
I was looking at you. It's for anyone. I mean, it's really hard. It doesn't have to be like one answer or the other. It's just interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think part of that can somewhat be solved if you have CRM data on the person, like you're capturing the email address, the point of purchase or whatnot, or maybe there's a warranty that they can register, things like that you can solve for. But it is a tough stitch, and I think just trying to solve for that, I think effectively is a challenge because you are taking some of these things with a grain of salt until it gets a bit more advanced. That's what I came with so far.
To kind of go off of that, I would agree. Collecting some sort of primary key that will help you link that data together is really what you're going for there. Whether it's asking at checkout for them to enter their email address, if you have that CRM data there, you can link it that way, or even a phone number you see quite often. So there's a variety of different ways you can do it. Obviously, it's not perfect as of yet, but there are methods in which you can get an idea of really how is that online shopping behavior transferred into offline purchases.
Cool. Great. Anybody else have any more questions? No? All right. Thank you, everybody. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. We still have another hour, so if anybody would like any drinks or cookies, feel free to talk yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That's great.